Lovely. Thanks very much, Declan, and nice to see everybody again. Hope you're all keeping well. Okay, so what we're going to do this morning is we're going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to take you through the mock paper that was sent out, and we'll go through some of the questions. We're not going to bother with the short questions. What I'm going to do with the short questions is I'm going to email you the answers when the session is over, okay? Because in the interest of time, I'm just going to focus on the longer ones because they're the ones that maybe require a bit more detail. So I'm going to focus on them. We're going to do that for about 35 minutes, all going well. So I glance at the clock. So I need to be aimed to be wrapping up about quarter to 12, 10 to 12, that kind of time. And then what we're going to do is the second part, we'll move on to the real exam, and I'm gonna put it up on the screen just for myself. The rest you won't be able to see it, I'm afraid, but I'm gonna put it up on the screen for myself. And what I will do is I will give you some idea as to what it is that might be coming up in a week's time. Okay. So that's what we'll do. Okay, so for the short questions, for the short questions, I'll email them out to you once we're finished. Longer questions, we're going to cover them off now. Okay. So in terms of the mock exam, the first longer question that we asked was this one, okay? And the format is that we're looking for you. There's 8 questions, and we're looking for you to answer any 3. So the first one that was on the mock paper was quite simply outline the benefits for firms engaging in international trade. Okay, that's what that was, short and simple. That's what the question was. Okay, and the best place to find the information that you need to answer the question are on pages 3 and 4 of Module 1, okay? All right, so pages 3 and 4 of Module 1 will give you a good idea as to the structure to answer that particular question, okay? And then if we just jump to pages 3 and 4 of Module 1, you can kind of see at the top, if you don't necessarily need to open the notes out, but when you do, you will see there's a little green kind of table at the top which says the benefits to the countries and the benefits to the firms. So we'd be interested in hearing your views on both. I suppose if you're only going to cover one, given the nature of the question, it's better to cover the benefits to the firms, but we'd be certainly happy to receive, and you're certainly lining yourself up for extra marks if you also put in what some of the benefits to the countries actually are, okay? So the structure of it is there, and what we're looking for you to explain is what are the benefits to the firms, and give some indication that you understand what it is that we're actually talking about when you see the outline there. So for instance, the first one there is a profit opportunities, okay? So profit opportunities is only a 2-word answer. Obviously, we're looking for a little bit more detail. Why are there profit opportunities for firms if they internationalize? And the reasons that there are profit opportunities for firms if they internationalize, first and foremost, I suppose, is the market expands, okay? If you're only trading in Ireland, if everybody in the country on the island of Ireland, and I mean absolutely everybody, buys one of your product, the max size of your market is in the region of about 5 million people, okay? If you expand into Europe, instead of potentially having a target market of 5 million people, you potentially have a target market of 300 million people. So obviously your opportunities to increase your profits are significant, okay? I suppose another example is if there are 10 competitors here in Ireland, all vying for the same market, and then maybe the max amount of market share you can get is somewhere between maybe 10 and 20% if you're lucky. If you look across to maybe France and you find out, right, there's only one other company that's offering the same product as you there, and they're not particularly big, your opportunity to, it may be worth your while to say, okay, well, let's maybe focus less of our attention in Ireland where there are 9 other competitors. Let's focus more of our attention on France, where there's only one. So profit opportunities is a good reason for doing it. Increased resource utilization is another one. Okay, if you create something like a piece of software, again, if the max you can do is maybe sell it to 5 million people, then the cost per product is maybe, it might be high. If you can sell to 300 million people, then the average cost of the investment that you put into creating that software decreases significantly. So you much better opportunity to maximize your return on the investment if you expand your market internationally rather than trade domestically only. Okay. I suppose following on, it allows for growth prospects. You can make your company bigger and expand it and go into Europe and then maybe go beyond. There is potentially decreased competition because, as I said, different products are adapted at different speeds in different countries. So you may have a crowded market here, but you may have a fairly open market somewhere else in Europe or beyond. And then the final thing that's called out in the little green table on the top of page 3 is improved business vision. You will learn things by trading internationally as well. You may potentially get the opportunity, an idea for your next big product from somewhere outside of Ireland, and that gives you an opportunity to expand your business. So that's the type of stuff we're looking for in terms of an answer. And I suppose I'll probably be a cracked record by the time this is over. But just to repeat, just to say to make sure I said at least once, the object of the exam is to show us that you understand the material that we've covered over the last number of weeks. And the best way to do that is include examples, okay, where you may have come across either examples that you've seen, I don't know, in the notes, or that by seeing an example in the notes, it's reminding you of an example somewhere from outside of the notes, or maybe something you've dealt with in your own working life. But it is important that you put things in your own words, okay? It's not a scavenger hunt. The aim isn't to say, okay, there's the correct section. I suppose to a certain extent, the short questions kind of are, okay? You find the answer and you put the answer in, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with just putting the answer in and moving on in the short questions. But for the longer questions, we're not looking for you to find pages of notes and then do a copy paste and say, there you go, Paul, there's your pages of notes. I've found the right section. We're looking for you to show that you understand it by answering the question in your own words. Okay, so probably repeat that a couple of times. Okay, so that's the kind of stuff that we're looking for in the event that question 1 were to make an appearance on the real exam. Are there any questions for me on that? No, we're good. Okay. So if we move on to question 2, I'm going to scroll down to question 2 because my notes are a bit longer than maybe what you have. So question 2, explain the risks in international business and what you can do to minimize them. Okay, so there's 2 parts to the question. 1 is explain what the risks are, and 2, what can you do about those risks? Okay, the best places to get the answer for that particular question are pages 23, 24, and 25, again in module 1. There's a bit more detail on it towards the end of module 3, but in terms of starting off, I would start off at module 1 and have a look at pages 23, 24, and 25, okay? And there are 4 risks in international business, okay? Now, I will just take the opportunity to call out that this is a question just to be a little bit careful where it's important to read the question, okay? Because sometimes people have given me something a bit different. You know, for instance, under country risk, there are 10 different risks within country risk. Sometimes people have gone off and when this question has come up before and talked about the 10 country risks, and that's great, but they need to talk about the other risks as well. So there are 4 risks in international business. There is country risk, there is currency risk, there is commercial risk, and there is cross-cultural risk, okay? So the first thing is to call out the 4. So, right, these are okay, Paul, you're looking for the 4 risks in international business. These are the 4 risks: country risk, currency risk, commercial risk, cross-cultural risk, okay? So what is country risk? Country risk essentially deals with some of the basics in terms of whether or not you're going to do business in a country. How safe is the country to do business in? How effective is the government? What is the changeover like when there's a change of government? Is it a little bit chaotic, or is it fairly smooth? You know, what are some of the kind of infrastructure requirements, you know, the labor laws? We are going to deal a bit more detail with some of these in one of the later questions, but that is the type of stuff we're looking for. That's a country risk, okay? You have a look and you read a report that kind of says, okay, what is it like in the country? Is the country safe? Is the country dangerous? Is the country, you know, does electricity run nearly 100% of the time, or does it not? Does broadband work? How strong are the labor unions? Is the government effective? If you have a contract in the country, will it be respected? Those are the types of things you're looking out for in terms of country risk, okay? The second one is currency risk, okay? So how volatile is the currency that you're dealing in? If you're dealing in a currency that is maybe, you know, fluctuates within the calendar year at a maximum, maybe, I don't know, 5-6%, the risk on the currency is not that high, okay? If if you come to an agreement at one point, and then a month's time or 2-3 months time when it comes to collect the money, the currency has fluctuated by max of 5-6%. I mean, it depends in terms of what your profit margins are, obviously. But if your profit margins are maybe 30-40%, then the impact is going to be fairly low. If, however, the currency may fluctuate in a calendar year anything up to maybe 30%, then that is a significant risk in terms of doing business, which you are going to have some plans to mitigate. Okay. So currency risk is the second one, okay? Third one is commercial risk, okay? And commercial risk applies at home the same way it does internationally. The only thing to keep in mind is that internationally, the impact may be a little bit greater. So commercial risk covers things like, okay, you picked the wrong product, okay? You're trying to sell something that people don't want. You've priced it incorrectly. You're targeting the wrong market. You've picked the wrong CEO to run your business internationally. Okay, those are the types of things. You can do those in Ireland just as well as you can do them, or as badly as you can do them somewhere else. But they may have an additional impact abroad. Okay, so commercial risk is the third one. All right. And then the last one is cross-cultural risk, okay, which we deal with quite a lot in modules 2 and modules 3, okay. One of the main reasons that we have all of that information in module 2 and module 3 is to try to reduce your cross-cultural risk, okay. So cross-cultural risk is the fourth risk, okay. Now, in terms of what you can do to try to mitigate those risks, I mean, so that's a key part of the question. It is important that you give us some indication as to what you can do to mitigate those risks. In terms of cross-cultural risk, the first thing you can do is read modules 2 and module 3. And that'll give you a good idea as to how to mitigate the risks. It'll give you an idea as to what it's like to do business in, for instance, China. And as a result, you will get off on the right foot in China if you've read that information and taken it in, rather than getting off potentially on the wrong foot in China. Commercial risk, I suppose the way to manage it is the same as at home. Essentially research it, okay? Find out what your competitors are doing, make sure you price things correctly, make sure it's a product that's worth selling. Obviously, if you're hiring a CEO, interview him or her a number of times, make sure you get a good background check as to what they're like and make sure they're the right person for the job. But those are the types of things you can do to mitigate commercial risk. And similar for country risk. If you research and say, okay, well, there's no point arriving and saying, okay, I'm going to set up a brand new factory, and you find out that the country is a borderline war zone. Okay, if you do that, obviously the chances of your new factory succeeding is probably pretty low. But a little bit of research will give you some ideas to, even just on the Department of Foreign Affairs websites, will give you some ideas to what the country risk is like in any of the countries in the world. And then lastly, in terms of currency risk, in terms of things you can do, you can trade in your own currency. You can fix the rates and say, okay, for the purposes of this contract, the dollar is worth €1.10. You can have bank accounts in a number of different currencies so that you don't necessarily need to move money at an inopportune time. Those are the types of things you can use to mitigate currency risk. Okay, so a lot of detail in that one. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So question 3 in the mock exam is, what are the main factors to take into account when dealing with people in different countries? Okay, so this is covered in module 2 and a reasonable chunk of module 3 as well. Okay, and I've got it written here in bold, so I'll call it now. The key thing to being successful in answering this question well and getting high marks is I would include examples. Okay. There are examples littered throughout the notes on it. If you've dealt with people, there's a pretty good chance you've either worked with people who come from other countries, or at the very, very least, you've probably met people who've come from other countries. Using those type of examples, it will be very beneficial to maximizing marks in this. But what is it that we're looking for in terms of answering the question, what are the main factors to take into account when dealing with people from different countries? The first one is greetings. Okay. And that's a nice, easy one because it's right at the beginning, and you can see immediately. Okay, in some countries, handshakes are the way to greet people. In other countries, kisses on the cheek are the way to greet people. If you go to kiss people on the cheek in a country that's used to getting handshakes, you may immediately get a bit of an odd look. Okay, bowing is the way to do it in other countries. It covers things also like an eye contact and introductions. Okay, all of that is covered in the notes as well. Some countries will nearly lock eyes with you permanently, whereas others will maybe avert their gaze quite regularly. So greetings is the first thing that we're looking for. Basic etiquette, including the do's and don'ts. There's do's and don'ts covered for each of the 20 countries that we've talked about in modules 2 and 3. So basic etiquette, the do's and don'ts is the second one. Communication, both verbal and non-verbal, is the next thing we're looking for. Okay, so in some countries, so this is I don't have time to give an awful lot of examples, but I will throw one or two in here where here and there where I can. The tone of people's voices will differ in certain countries. In some countries, people talk quite loudly. Okay. And it might almost sound like, if you're not from that country, it might almost sound like they're shouting, but they're not. They're talking in the tone that they would normally talk in. Other countries are a lot more soft-spoken and quieter, and so even if maybe they are enthusiastic about something, or maybe if they're irritated by something, they will still keep their voice low and monotone and calm, even though in reality there is an element of excitement behind them. Non-verbal communication, which we did talk. There's a number of questions there in the short tests about that. Personal distance, eye contact again, how silence is handled, how laughter is interpreted. Some countries are very serious, whereas some countries are a bit more lighthearted, and laughter will go down well. How to conduct meetings and how to conduct phone calls. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3. There's 6 of them there. So just to repeat them: greetings, basic etiquette, including do's and don'ts. Verbal and non-verbal communication, that's 3 and 4, and then meetings and phone calls. How you handle these are the key things to keep in mind in terms of, right, well, is it different doing business in France versus doing business in, say, China? Okay, those are the things to keep in mind. So that's what we're looking out for in terms of a good answer for question 3. And like I was saying, a key to answering it: 1, answer it in your own words, so don't just lift stuff from the notes. But 2, put as many examples in as you can realistically fit in the time that you have. So that's what we're looking for in terms of question 3. Any questions on that? Okay, all right. So question 4 is, what are the main differences in how a meeting would be conducted in 5 countries of your choice? Okay, so this is the first opportunity maybe to slim things down a little bit for you. Okay, so there are 20 countries all covered in the notes. Okay, the most we're going to ask you for, there's not going to be a question that says, okay, tell us what the key differences are between France and Australia. Okay, because we're narrowing down France and Australia, so you need to have a good knowledge of both. What we're the most precise we're going to get is 5 countries of your choice. Okay, so if we're asking you a question, we're going to say, talk about 5 countries of your choice. Okay, so that gives you an opportunity, if you wish, to more or less put aside 15 of the 20 countries that are there. So, if you have worked with people from France, people from Italy, the US, the UK, and I don't know, say China, you can pick those 5 countries and say, right, I'm not going to worry too much about the other 15 in answering any questions. Okay, so what I'm saying there is, if you know 5 countries that you have chosen well, you will be in a position to answer any question in this area that we ask you about. Okay, so you can, I don't really want to say the word disregard, but you can deprioritize, I suppose, 15 of the 20 countries, because the most we're going to ask you about at any one time is 5, and you won't get a question saying, right, let's talk to us about France and talk to us about Australia. Okay. So in terms of, in question 3, we were talking about, okay, well, what are the things to look out for in terms of differences between countries? Here we're getting more specific. We're saying we're picking one of the areas, which is meetings, and we're saying, okay, let's drill down another level and talk to us about the differences that you might see when holding a meeting in different countries. Okay, and you can pick the countries of your choice. So the things we're looking out for are these. There's another 1, 2, 3. There's 7 of them. Okay, so first one we're looking for is punctuality. Okay, in some countries, if the meeting starts at 9:02 when it's supposed to start at 9, people are already getting irritated. In other countries, if you start the meeting at 9:02 when it was supposed to start at 9, you'll be pretty much doing it on your own. Okay, so punctuality is the first one to consider. How formal or casual is the meeting going to be? Okay, in the US, for instance, even though time is money, there may well be an element of casualness to it. Okay, in other countries, formality is taken very seriously. So, is it going to be a very formal, or is it likely to be formal or likely to be casual? How do you handle greetings and introductions? Okay, in some countries, in the US, with US people, for instance, if you sit there and wait to be introduced, you might be waiting a long time. Okay. they would expect you to kind of stand up or sit down or shake hands with people to your left and your right and kind of say and give them an introduction and almost share your CV and some of your achievements with you. Okay. In other cultures, that would come across as very rude. Okay. So how do we handle greetings and introductions? How do we handle business cards? Okay, that was there's at least one, if not two questions on that in the short questions. So how do we handle business cards? How do we handle small talk in some countries? Like I said, in the US, time is money, and it might well be a case, well, let's get down to business. In other countries, there might be an expectation that you'd spend an hour doing a little bit of small talk before you get onto any sort of business. Okay. So all of that is contained within the 20 countries. So I suppose find that information and have it ready to hand. Okay. How do you introduce yourself? Covered that off a moment ago. And then how do you handle introductions and objections? Okay. Some countries will be very direct if they don't agree with you. And my God, you'll be very clear as you're leaving the room that they don't. There'll be other countries where people will not want to embarrass themselves or not want to embarrass you. So they will disagree, but they will disagree a lot more subtly than they will in other countries. Okay. So the 7 areas that are in there: punctuality, formal versus casual meetings, greetings and introductions, how to handle business cards, small talk, how to introduce yourself, some of which I suppose comes under the heading of the greetings, and then disagreements and rejections, how they're handled. And the topic that we are covering in question 4 is meetings. Any questions on any of that? Okay. Very good. So question 5 is write a note on 10 separate risk criteria to be included in your operational risk model. Okay, so again, this is when you see the word risk, I'll just invite you just to so you avoid some of maybe the challenges that maybe some of your predecessors have had. If risk comes up in a question, which almost certainly will, just read the question maybe a second time, just make sure you're answering what we're looking for. So this is the risk model, the operational risk model, and this is covered in module 3, and it's on pages 3 to 5. Okay. Sorry, yeah, 3 to 5 of the second section. So once we're finished with the 20 countries, there's a second section in module 3, and it's in the first 3 to 5 pages of that second section. Sorry, pages 3, 4, and 5 of that second section. So what we're looking for here is there's actually 10 different risk criteria, and it essentially comes under the area of country risk. Okay, it's a subcategory of the country risk, and there's 10 different criteria. Now, the most you're going to have in terms of time to answer the questions in the real exam is probably about 30 minutes. Okay, most 35. Okay, so there's 10 of these to cover off. The question says write a short note on each of them. You've only got about 3 minutes for each, so do I suppose kind of spread your time as evenly as you can, because that'll get you the most marks. Okay, so just a couple of examples again in the interest of time. I won't have time to go through too much, but in terms of security, as I mentioned earlier, if your country is that you're planning on investing in is maybe somewhere where there's an awful lot of unrest at the moment, you need to keep that in mind and build that into your operational risk model. Okay, so is the country physically safe? Is there a likelihood of armed conflict? Is there currently armed conflict? If there are demonstrations, do they usually turn violent? Those are things you need to keep in mind. Okay. If I take another example, labor markets would be part of the risk model. I mean, sorry, just to call out the 10 things first of all, and then I'll just go into 1 or 2 examples. In the risk model, you should cover off security, political stability, government effectiveness, legal and regulatory environment. All this in the notes. So macroeconomic risk. Okay, so how likely is the economy to turn sour at short notice? Trade and payments issues. Okay, can payments be issued? Can money leave the country easily enough? Labor markets. How strong are the trade unions? Are strikes likely? And if they are they likely to go on for long? Financial risks, tax policy, and then infrastructure. Okay. So all of these are things you need to build into your risk model. So don't really have time to go into massive detail on all of them, but I mean, just as an example, labor markets, as I said, what is the likelihood? How strong are the trade unions? How is it a case that we can make changes easily if you want to change people's jobs, or do you need to consult with the trade unions if anything changes are going to happen? Is the likelihood of a resolution with trade unions pretty good, or is it likely that it nearly always ends in strikes? Those are types of things to kind of keep in mind. Macroeconomic risks, again, how likely is the economy to turn sour at very short notice? Some economies in the world are fairly stable and don't experience recessions on a regular basis. Some go from boom to bust pretty quickly. And as a result, if you've invested an awful lot of money just before the bust arrives, you may find yourself in trouble. So those are the types of things to build into your risk model. But the full details of that are in module 3. It's in the second section, and they are pages 3, 4, and 5. Okay, but just a key point on that one, you have 10 things to cover off. It's only a short note on each. You only have about 3 minutes on each, so do try and spread your time fairly evenly. Okay. All right. So question 6 is explain with examples the effect of foreign exchange risk can have on transactions over time. And this is covered on the second section again of module 3, and it's covered in pages 7 and 8. So just after the information from the last question. Okay. And the reason this is important is if we follow the example that's there in the notes, if you agree to buy 1,000 items for $20 each to be delivered next month, if the exchange rate between the dollar and the euro is 91 cents, is it a euro? Is that a euro? Sorry, a dollar is worth 91 cents euro. The value, the cost of the goods is 18,200. Okay. And then if you add a 5% profit margin, you're going to sell the goods for just over 19,000, and that's going to give you a profit of a little bit under 1,000 euros on your goods. Okay, so that's if the dollar is worth 91 cents to the euro cents. Okay. If, however, the dollar strengthens and instead of being worth 91, it's now worth 97 cents, the price of the goods goes up to 19,400. And that means you're going to sell your goods. You're not going to change the price of your goods. You're going to sell your goods at 19,110. You're now losing just under 300 euros on the transaction. Okay. So that shows you what the impact of it doesn't look that big, but it's only a strengthening of the dollar by 6 cents, but it's going from 91 to 97. And that changes the scenario from you making 1,000 euros on the transaction to losing just under 300 euros. Okay. If the reverse applies and the dollar falls and it goes to a rate of 85 cents, the price of your goods is going to go to just all the way down to 17,000, and you're now going to make a profit of 2,000 euros, just over 2,000 euro on the transaction. You're taking back in 19,110, and you've paid out 1,700. You're making the rest. You keep 2,110. Okay. What can you do to mitigate these risks? There are 4 things. One, you can fix a company rate for the currency. So you can say, for the purpose of this transaction, the dollar and the euro are going to be worth, 1 euro is going to be worth $1.10 cents. So you can agree that. You can do a spot rate. Okay, so that in that one you don't agree with your customer, but you agree with the bank that the rate is always going to remain at 110. You can hold a number of different bank accounts, okay, which in some ways is the best one because you can choose the time that you move money from one account to the other, okay. It means when the customer pays, you can just let it sit in the dollar bank account or the euro bank account or whatever bank account it is, and you can choose an opportune moment to move it. Or you can just trade for your own currency. You can put a clause in the contract that says, okay, all payments are going to be in euro. That's it, okay. Whether or not the customer is going to agree probably depends on how big the customer is or how big you are. Okay, if you're the bigger party in the group and they need you more than you need them, you can probably dictate. If it's the other way around, they may ultimately decide, or it may be something that works for both of you. Okay. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So we're doing okay for time. So I have about kind of 4 or 5 minutes that I can spend on I'm not going to do the last question. The last question is on legal systems. Okay, but I'll quickly tell you, if we cover the legal systems, we'll be here all day, but I'll quickly tell you the information where you can get it. And most of you have already done an assignment on the legal systems anyway, so I think your knowledge of it is pretty good. But I'll talk about the legal systems just for a moment afterwards, but we're not going to cover it off in any detail. So the last question we're going to cover off in detail is this one, which is question 7. And that question is, discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the 4 main collection options open to large multinational companies. Okay, So this comes from module 4, and it's covered on pages 3, 4, 5, and 6 in module 4. Okay. So this is saying, okay, right. So, we've gone international. We have customers all across Europe. How are we going to collect the money when inevitably we have scenarios that we need to do it? Okay. Sorry, just bear with me 1 second. Nope. Okay. There are 4 options. Okay, so we've set ourselves up across Europe, and we're asking ourselves, okay, where are we going to put our collectors to collect the money that we need to collect? Okay, so there's 4 options. You can either put it in the customer's own country. Okay, so maybe you're doing business in 10 different countries. What you do is you put 1 or more collectors in each of those customers' countries. We'll talk in a minute as to what the advantages and disadvantages are doing that. 2, certainly historically, and I've worked in a number of them myself, Dublin has had a number of shared service centres over the years where collectors have been based, and they reach out all across Europe. And so it's based centrally. You have a French team, a German team, a Spanish team, and whatever else, and they all reach out. They all learn from each other. They all work together, but they all reach out to the various customers in the various countries, and they collect money accordingly. Third option is to split the 2. So you may have collectors in 1 country. You may have a team. If we take France as an example, maybe you have a team of 5 collectors. Maybe you put 2 of them in France, and then the other 3 are based, let's say, somewhere centrally. Let's say Dublin. Okay, that's the third option. Or the fourth one is you outsource it to a third party, something that my own company would love you to do with us. You outsource it to a third party, and you say, okay, well, we're going to outsource the entire collections function, and you guys go and you collect the money for us, and we're going to focus on selling. Okay. The advantages of doing a customer's own country would be these. Okay, so if you want to put the collectors in, for argument's sake, France, what are the advantages of doing it? The strong local knowledge. Okay, chances are, if you're going to have your collectors in France, you're actually going to hire French people. Okay, so they will know, and they may well have spent all of their life in France. They will know what it's like they will know what other French people are like and how to potentially get money out of them. Okay. There's greater scope for building relationships with customers because you can potentially put them in a taxi or on a train and get them to go and visit the customers. Okay, if you're based in Dublin, that's a little bit more difficult. Okay, you're talking planes and you're talking hotel rooms. Okay, if the collectors are based in France, they can go and they may well be able to go and visit your key customers. You have a better chance of building relations. Chances are that sales and marketing for France will be based in France. Okay, if they're your neighbors and they're just down the hall, you can go and you can build a relationship with them a little bit easier than if you're only doing it through conference calls. Okay, you might have lunch together and so on. You might become friends, so that might make things easier. Okay, and then the last thing is there is less of a chance of cross-cultural risk if if your collectors are French, the customers are French, your cross-cultural risk is kind of gone. Okay. The disadvantages are it may be slower. It may be slower in terms of knowledge sharing than maybe a shared service model. I mentioned earlier, you could have a scenario where you have a French team, a German team, a Spanish team. Those people all go to meetings together. They all learn from each other. They all do training together. Your opportunity to improve your collection service among those people is probably greater than if they're scattered in Spain and France and Germany and Italy. Okay. There may be less management support. Okay, if you only have a couple of collectors, are you going to have a very senior manager based on site managing 2 people? Probably not. It's probably going to be a case of, well, it's going to be part of somebody's job and not all of their job. The IT support might be a bit weaker. Okay, you have a better chance of buying the latest, fanciest IT system to do collections if you're all based in one shared service center. There's 150 of you. Than if you have to roll it out across a number of different countries. Okay, and I've also seen this myself. There's less synergy. There can be less synergy when it's spread across Europe. Okay, the people in Spain mightn't get to know the people in France that well. All right. Okay, so those are the disadvantages of doing it. The advantages and disadvantages of doing it in a customer's country. It's the reverse in a shared service center. Okay, all right. So all of the advantages that you have of doing it in shared when you're in the country, they become the disadvantages that you can't do them when you do shared service, and the reverse. Okay. The advantages of combining the 2 formats is it's a bit more agile. Okay, so the bank holidays in France don't always match the bank holidays in Ireland. So you can have scenarios where people in, you have a bit more coverage and you don't have as many days, you don't lose as many days to bank holidays. So a bit more agile. There is less team synergy. I've certainly seen this myself. It becomes a bit us and them. I say, well, we're collecting our money, but those guys over in France, they're not doing as good a job, So, and the reverse, you ring France and say, oh no, it's the Dublin guys who aren't doing their job, And you also have to have, I mean, a disadvantage is you have to have you have to have two offices, two seat charges. You have a footprint in both, which comes at a cost. Okay. And then finally, last kind of couple of points, the advantages of outsourcing is that a company may come in and they might have the fanciest collections software available and say, oh yeah, well, you're a customer of ours, we'll sign a deal for 2-3 years and we'll and you can use the software that we developed. You can tell I've done this before. So there's that, and it can be more cost effective because if you outsource completely, and say you're outsourcing your later debt, it might well be a case of, well, it's no win, no fee type scenario. So you won't have to pay for the collectors at all. The only way you pay is they get a percentage of whatever it is they recover. Okay. The disadvantages of outsourcing is you lose the relationship with the customer. Okay, so you have less control as to how well or badly they're treated. There's definitely delays in terms of handovers. When you get queries, it's a case, okay, well, the query is logged by a company and then it's moved into another company that escalated up, and there's an awful lot of handoffs and so on. So delays effectively happen. And then finally, it's not going to be effective if the staff are not well trained. I mean, if it's your staff, you can control who you hire and what sort of training you give them. If it's somebody else's staff, you don't have as much of a say in it if you're the customer. If you're effectively the customer, if you've hired some other company to do it, they will hire the people, and you don't really have much of a say as to whether they're good or bad at their jobs. Okay. So a good bit of talking there, and I'm running tight on time, but that was question 7. Just quickly, any immediate questions on that? Okay. And just quickly on the last question, which I said I'm not going to cover, that information, the question was, write a note on the options open to you to enforce a judgment in 3 countries of your choice. If such a question were to come up, that is covered in pages 20 to 42, which is, that's 22 pages of module 4. That's why I'm not going to go into it. And there are 10 different countries covered there. And some of you may have done an 11th one for your assignment as well that was not covered in the notes. So there's plenty of material there. Okay. But I will give you your first hint and say legal judgments are not on the main exam in terms of a long question anyway. Okay, could appear as a short little question, but in terms of a long question, we're not covering off the legal side of things. You all did it as your assignment, so we're assuming you know it pretty well at this stage. Okay. So I've got 8 minutes left to remain on track, and I'm under pressure because Katrina did manage to finish on time, so I'm going to try and do the same. But in a minute, we're now going to move off. Unless there's any questions on the mock, I am going to move on to the real exam, which I know is why you're all here, and give you some hints as to what's going to come up. Okay, I think I'll just keep going, and then we can keep any questions there to the end. Okay, so what's coming up in the real exam? So same format. Okay, so you've got the short questions. Okay, so we're going to look for answers for you on those, and that essentially is a scavenger hunt. Okay, if you find the answer, you can just put it in. Okay, yeah, a little bit more detail, great. But I'm not going to be nasty and say, oh, you only put a couple of words, so I'm not going to give you the mark. I am going to give you the mark. Okay, so as long as the answer is correct. All right. Okay. But first, so 10 short questions, relatively easy marks, can come from anywhere in the course. So I suppose it's good to have a reasonable knowledge as to what might be in there, at least an overview as to what's actually in there in terms of answering the short questions. In terms of the longer questions, so same format again, there are 8 questions there, and we're looking for you to answer 3 of them. Okay. And let me see, what do we have in terms of those questions? So the first question is from module 1. Okay, these could be mixed up a bit, okay, but there is a question from module 1 in there, okay? And it's very similar to one of the questions on the mock paper. So what I would do is I would go back to the mock paper, I would isolate the module 1 questions, and I'd have a go at answering them, okay? At the very least in your head, and maybe even better down on paper, okay? Because there is a similar question there, all right? So if you know the module 1 questions from the mock, you have a good shot at getting one of your questions nailed on the real exam, okay? The second question is also from Module 1, and it's from in and around the middle of Module 1, all right? So it's not right at the beginning, but if you zero in and around the middle pages of Module 1, there's a section there, and that's going to appear on the real exam, okay? So that's question 2, okay? It could be moved around, but there are 2 questions from Module 1 in there, okay? Question 3 is from Modules 2 and 3. So this is from the 20 countries, okay? And the question is, so I mean, I've got kind of roughly the question here, but the question is, discuss how you'd approach something differently in 5 countries of your choice. So it could be, how would you do a meeting in 5 countries of your choice? How would you do a phone call in 5 countries of your choice? How would you handle greeting people in 5 countries of your choice? That type of thing. Okay, so there's 7 or 8 maybe common themes kind of running through those 20 countries. It's going to be one of those, and it's going to say, right, talk about 5 countries and how you might handle the phone calls, the meetings, the whatever it is, okay? And you have a choice. You can either talk about, if your first country is the US, you can either talk about the US and say, right, here's everything I know about the US, and then move on to the next one, or you can do it by theme. You can kind of maybe break it up. If it's meetings, for instance, there's subcategories on the meetings, and you say, okay, here's how you handle punctuality in America, in France, in Spain, in Italy, or whatever. You can do that, or you can do all of America and do all of the categories and then move on to Spain, then move on to Italy, then move on to France, and so on, okay? But question 3 is from the 20 countries, and to discuss how would you approach something differently in 5 of your countries, okay? The 4th question, again, is from the 20 countries, and again, it is very similar to a question on the mock paper, okay? So again, I would isolate those questions on the mock paper. So, right, what are the questions on the mock paper that cover the top 20 countries, and be very familiar with how to answer it, because that will be time well spent, all right? And then question 5 is very similar to what we had in question 3. So again, it's discuss how you'd approach something differently in 5 countries of your choice. So one of them might be meetings, the other might be telephone calls, one of them might be greetings, the other might be punctuality, but something like that, okay, where it appears in all of those 20 countries. One of those themes will be there, and it's not just there once, it's there twice, okay? So in theory, I mean, if you wanted to really focus on the kind of modules 2 and 3, and you didn't find module 1 so appealing, you could, you wouldn't have a huge amount of choice, but you could get your 3 questions out of the way just from those kind of 20. Now make sure you finish off module 2 and 3. There's other stuff in module 3 as well, so maybe do that as well, just to be safe. But in theory, you could focus just on modules 2 and 3, forget about 1 and 4, and do them. Doesn't give you a huge amount of choice, but you could do that, okay? Question 6 comes from module 3, and it's when we finish the top 20 countries, okay? So I kind of jumped ahead a little bit there, but you have something there as well, which is, okay, so module 3, we're finished with the top 20 countries. There's more stuff after that. Have a look at the more stuff, and that will allow you to answer question 6. Okay. And then 7 and 8, I can crash together because they're both from, not too surprisingly, both from module 4. And as I said to you earlier, it's not the legal system. So the legal systems gobbles up probably the guts of about half of the module, okay? Maybe not quite, but about half the module. It's not the legal systems, okay? You cover that off in the assignment, so we're kind of taking it as a given. A lot of you are scoring very well in that, so we're taking it as a given that you know your legal systems. It's something else, okay? It's one of the other sections that's in there, okay? None of the sections, apart from legal systems, none of the sections are that long, okay? They're all about maybe 3-4 pages or so. So not a massive amount of reading to become familiar with it, and it is, the information is available to you there. So it's not that that's closed book, and it's not the old days where you can leave the bag at the door and you go into the exam hall and you forget everything and you can't do it. It is there if you need it, okay? But you need to be familiar with it, because you're not going to be able to go on spend most of your 30 minutes hunting stuff. You want to be spending your 30 minutes writing, okay? So my final guidance would be this. So like I said, particularly on the top 20 countries, examples are great, okay? It is not a scavenger hunt, so don't copy. If you find yourself copying paragraphs of stuff and then putting it into the answer book, that's not really what we're looking for. You're not going to score that well by doing that. So So yeah, we are looking for stuff in your own words. We are looking for examples where possible. That and manage your time effectively. Try and spend an even amount. If you do want to answer a fourth question, by all means, go ahead. I think people who tend to score better are usually ones who answer just the three. But if you feel you want to kind of do a fourth one, yeah, give that a go. You don't unfortunately get marks for all of it. So you're not going to get kind of 60 in one and 60 in another and then keep going. What we will do is we will give you your top three scoring questions. We'll delete the lowest scoring one, but we will give you the scores from the top three. So I'm bang on 12. Katrina probably managed to do it even with the questions, but so I'm bang on 12 now. So I will shut up, but I will give you an opportunity to ask questions. You've been very patient with me, so I'm nice and quiet. So I'll give you an opportunity to ask any questions.